I'm ready to start writing. Now, I start my introduction. I want to grab my reader and get them interested in what I have to say. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to need a hook. And actually, I never start writing my hook right on the paper itself, because I found that if I make 4 or 5 different hooks, and I tend to be a lot more creative and I get a better result if I do some brainstorming before I get started. So I have this hooks page which helps me brainstorm. Now, the first type of hook you can use is a famous quote, and if you click on this link, it'll take you to Brainy Quotes. Now, the problem with using a quote as a hook is that oftentimes there aren't any good quotes about classroom management, which is what my paper is about, so I have to do a little bit of thinking. In its heart and soul, what is classroom management all about? Is it about control? Is it about appropriate behavior? Is it about helping students learn? What is the heart, the seed of classroom management? I really think it's about leadership, and I think I am probably likely to find a lot of quotes about leaders. So I go to Brainy Quote and I type leader up here in its search bar, and it's going to give me lots of different quotes. Now, I know that I'm going to want to use a pretty short, pithy quote, so I'm going to ignore all of these really long ones and try to find a nice, pithy one. Ooh. Here's a nice short one. It says, "Innovation distinguishes between a leader and a follower," by Steve Jobs. I really like that one because my paper is about technology and it's also about leadership. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that one. If I click on it, I can copy and paste. And I might eventually have to change the format of that, but I go over here, paste, and all I need to do here is change. Don't like the way they spelled innovation. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so all I need to do here is change the font. And I'm in business. That was pretty easy. Okay, the next thing I need to do is come down here and think of an anecdote. If I have a personal story about classroom management, which I do, I could share that. Or if I don't have a personal story about classroom management, I could use a myth or a fable or a well-known fairy tale and just kind of sum it up in 1 or 2 sentences. As I was thinking about this, classroom management, a fairy tale that reminds me of classroom management is the Aesop's fable of the fox and the crow. So I went ahead and wrote a story about that. There once was a crow with a piece of cheese. A fox came by and wanted the cheese, so he complimented the crow on her beauty. She opened her mouth to say thank you, and the cheese dropped and was gobbled up by the fox. This is like teaching. Teachers are often tricked by students if they aren't careful. Instead of teaching, they will end up spending the whole time dealing with bad behaviors. Okay, so that's a fable. It's not great, but oh well. I'm just brainstorming here. Painting a picture asks me to use sensory language here rather than just come out and say there was a teacher and her students were misbehaving. That's hitting it a little bit too on point. So what I want to do is kind of describe it without actually telling people that the students are misbehaving. So I'm going to try to use hearing words and sight words. A teacher stands at the front of her room. Paper airplanes crisscross in front of her. The buzz of the conversation drowns out the sound of the tardy bell. One student races after another, trying to grab the folder that was stolen from him. There will not be much teaching done today. So I've talked about how a poorly managed classroom sounds and what it looks like without actually telling people that there's a classroom management problem here, because you can figure it out. It's a lot more interesting as well. I'm sure you've all had that opportunity. Startling statistic. I'm going to need some numbers here, so I'm going to have to do some research. Here's an article that I found about classroom management and had some pretty interesting numbers. The one that I found was most interesting involved how classroom management is the thing that causes a lot of teachers to quit. It says right here, the Ingersoll found that over 30% of teachers indicated classroom management issues as their primary reason for leaving the profession. So in my hooks, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to share that statistic. There's a great teacher shortage, and 1/3 of teachers who leave the profession are abandoning their students because they won't behave. Okay, so I've shared a number that people can relate to. Next, I need to talk about some sort of misconception people have about classroom management. I think one misconception that I hear new teachers say a lot before they've actually had any experience with students is that if you treat students with respect, they will automatically treat you with respect. I have found that to be untrue. Sometimes you treat students with respect and they still are disrespectful. So I think you do have to treat them with respect, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. So now I'm going to look over all my hooks and decide which one I like the best. And for me, I actually like my quote the best out of all of these. So I am just going to copy it, come over here, and I'm not even going to preface it. I'm just going to stick that quote right in. Now, obviously, the font is wrong. I can tell right away that this is not Times New Roman. I'm right. It's Arial. Times New Roman, 12-point font is what we always want to have. Now, actually, I am going to preface this a little bit. I'm going to tab so that it's a new paragraph, and I'm going to say, Steve Jobs said, once said, innovation distinguishes between a leader and a follower. And I'm going to have to put that in quotations. Okay, and I also need to add a comma. So now what I'm going to have to do is kind of take that hook and I'm going to have to transition into what I really want to talk about, which is teachers and technology. Okay. Teachers are important leaders. And, okay, so now my hook kind of moves into what I want to talk about in my paper. And that's it. Thanks. Bye. Hope that helped.